Hi, we're going to continue with induction. Uh, we talked about the relationship between the sample and the target. The example we were using was the sample was the 1,000 teachers that we sampled, and the target would be all 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 the teachers in the U.S. Probably around 2 million, from what I have learned. And in order for this to work, we have to make the sample an exact dollhouse of the full-size house for the teachers. In other words, the sample has to be a representative sample. It has to represent the target. And so if we do not have a representative sample, then the whole inductive argument is not going to work. You can think of an inductive argument in this case would be the sample would be the premise, and the conclusion would be the target. So we're going from a specific to a general, but the specific is a perfect or near perfect model on a small scale of the general. So specific is the premise, general is the conclusion. Okay, there are some specific terms that you'll need to know. The sample is sometimes called the observed x's. In the example we've been using, the x's would be teachers, and the observed ones would be the ones that we've actually counted, the ones that we've taken a sample of. In the example, the observed x's would be 1,000 teachers. N would be the number of people in the sample. In this case, N would be 1,000. The target population would be all of the teachers. Or the feature in this example would be whether the teacher is a Democrat or not. Feature is what we're attempting to find the answer about. Okay, the sampling frame is the difference between what is included in the sample and what is excluded in the sample. In this case, we're going to be dealing with teachers. And so it might seem easy enough to just say we're going to take a sample of teachers. Well, there are lots of different kinds of teachers. Do we include teachers in preschool? Do we include administrators who are teaching one class? Do we include Sunday school teachers, so forth and so on? So we need to clarify who we're going to count as a teacher, or in other words, who we're going to sample, and who we're not going to count, who we're going to exclude from being a counted teacher. So in this case, what is done is that we take the membership of a union. It could be something else, but in this particular example, we're using union membership as our sampling frame. In other words, in this case, it's the AFT, or American Federation of Teachers, which is the CFT here in California. The California Federation of Teachers happens to be the union that that we belong to at Evergreen Valley College. And so what we do is we just count members of the union arbitrarily. And so if you are a member of the union, then you count. If you are not, then you are excluded. And so that's what we mean by the sampling frame. It's basically it's a way of clarifying who gets counted, who is in the sample, and who is excluded from the sample. as I've mentioned, the key to making this kind of argument work is the sample has to be an exact model of the target. And so sometimes we can have a sample that is not an exact model of the target. And when we have that, it's called a biased sample. And basically all that means is that we have overweighted some element higher than it should be, that our sample is not proportional. For example, supposing we took a sample of people who attend church, and say we make a pretty big sample, and then we ask them whether they like or whether they favor abortion rights or oppose them. And the chances are that people who attend church are a bit more conservative, and that the result of the sample would be that there would be a heavier amount of pro-life people in that sample. And so that sample would be biased. It doesn't mean that the people are biased. It just simply means that the sample is overweighted churchgoers and underweighted people who do not go to church. So it's difficult. It's not easy, but it's important that we have a neutral sample that's not biased in any direction. It has to be an exact replication of the so some of the things that we have to look at is the size of the sample. Okay, if the size is too small, then we're not going to get good results. If we, like my example of 2 Vietnamese students at the gas station, and I said, well, I'm going to sample those 2 and ignore everybody else, then that means that 100% of the students at Evergreen are all Vietnamese. Obviously, that sample is too small, and so we would call that a hasty generalization, or it's like jumping to a conclusion. Another way, however, of looking at that sample is that it doesn't contain enough diversity. Okay, there aren't enough Asians of a different ethnicity, and there aren't enough Latinos, and there aren't enough African Americans, and there aren't enough Caucasians. All those groups have been ignored, and so the sample is too small. And part of the reason that that's bad is that a sample of 2 people cannot represent all the different diverse elements of the student body. So we would say about that sample that it's too small and that it's not big enough to represent the diversity. Okay, a third kind of inductive argument is called argument from analogy. And what that is we're comparing one thing to another. So it assumes that the more things are alike in ways, they will be alike in further ways. Okay, so we can use that to predict or guess at whether one would like something and that both would like that same thing. For example, let's say that Cheryl and Denise, we're going to compare one to the other. So those would be example of the terms of the analogy. And so let's say that Cheryl likes the Chronicles of Narnia, and that we don't know whether Denise does or not. Okay, so in essence, what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the similarities between the 2, and if there are quite a few, then we're going to conclude that if Cheryl likes the Chronicles, then Denise will probably also like it as well. So let's take a look at the similarities. Let's say they're both sisters, roughly the same age, same high school. They like the same TV programs and the same movies. Okay, so this would suggest that they're very similar and that they're similar in very relevant ways. For example, that they like to see the same movies. So if we would say, okay, does Cheryl like the Chronicles of Narnia? Then she does. Then we would say, okay, Denise is very similar to Cheryl in this respect. And so we're going to predict that Denise also likes the Chronicles of Narnia. So it's an inductive argument based on the number of similarities. And it's called an argument, an analogical argument.